are apparently my specialty, so I get asked a lot of questions about how I go about doing it, so I figured it'd be nice to put out a tutorial on the process of how I tattoo a rose. So without further ado, let's get to it. So we're going to pour our color palette, and I've chosen some colors that I think will work very well with the reference that I have over here. This is a beautiful rose reference that I found online. I get my references wherever I can, whether it's my own personal photography or I'll go online and find something. I try to make sure I have a full palette. Make sure that I have everything that I need. I don't want to have to get up in the middle of a tattoo to go and get the color that I may have missed on my tray. Better to have and not need than need and not have. And it's pretty much well known in the industry that realism artists pour way too many damn colors. And there's good reason for that. So. You'll notice I have colors that are out here that are not really consistent with the reference that I chose. But a lot of the time I use them as maybe a tint to try and manipulate a color in a certain direction. And other times I sometimes pull the wrong colors from the shelf thinking that they're going to be used in the tattoo, but in reality is that I made an error and I pulled the wrong color out. So that's why I have an abundance of colors, so that I can make the tattoo happen without having to get up and go to the ink cabinet every time I'm missing a color. So I'm pouring out a set of neutral grays from Eternal. And these will be so that I can, adjust the chroma of, the colors that I have selected. As you may know, chroma is something that realism artists work with, and if you're not familiar with it, you should be. Chroma is actually the intensity of a color, or how saturated the color is. And not everything's always going to be a nice bright red or bold and pretty pink or something. Oftentimes it's been diluted with white or black, which kind of threw a tint and lessen the saturation of the color. Oftentimes you hear people call it muted. So to mute a color or whatever, you're basically messing around with the chroma. I personally don't like the term mute. I got some cool colors for the background, and if I want to also tint any colors, in a cooler direction, I can do that. These are some of my favorite colors to use, is the cool colors from Eternal. That guy's not coming out. He's being stingy. Get every last drop. Come on, sucker. Alright. There we go. These cool colors will mainly be for the background of this tattoo. If you look at the reference here, definitely got a lot of places that are like cool greens and stuff. And I don't want the entire background to be a bunch of green, so I've selected some of these cool grays to kind of throw back there. Now we'll get in the greens here. Some of these greens are nice and like really green. Some are more on the browner side of it, things here. Like say, this forest green is not a really bright green. It's kind of olive drab. As if you were to take a nice bright green and mix orange with it, you'd probably end up with this kind of color here. Kind of knocks down the intensity of it. So it's like a warmer green, basically, that's not so saturated. And as with anything, you know, I try and go through the value scale from dark to light, making sure I have a good range in values for each hue that I have. There's no particular way in which I set up my colors on the palette here. As long as I have them, I'm fine with that. I get asked a lot of questions on like, how do you set up your palette? Do you like certain colors arranged in a certain way or whatever? And I'm like, no, I really don't care as long as I have them. You know, because to me, they're all going to get used, and you know, the method to the madness is all in my head, and that's a fucked up place to be. But it works for me. Whatever works for you, that's fine. By all means, do it. Did I use this color already? I did. Here I got some cooler greens for the background before I go into the cool grays there, which are like right there. Big difference, you know what I mean? This one will be farther back in the background. This will be more up close. And I believe these colors are consistent with the reference that I have chosen, so hopefully we can not have to get up and go grab any more colors from the back cabinet during the tattoo. Couple extra whites to dip into, and also I like to have some extra grays to mess around with, so in case they get tinted or messed up from dipping back and forth, I can have an extra one so I can have a pure gray. So here's my color palette. And it should be rather consistent with my reference right above here. I have a great number of paper towels already folded up and ready to go, so I don't have to mess around. Kind of saves time. Here's the NeoRail system that I have. You know, each one of these slots are pre-programmed so that if I pull the cartridge out, it already has a pre-designated speed for each slot. And a disposable grip on my Scorpion tattoo machine from Ink Machines with a wireless battery pack that I can get about 7 hours of solid tattooing out of before I would have to change it out. Most of the time I don't even have to change the battery out. The battery pack is 100% intensity as far as like how long it lasts. And when it starts to die off, it just cuts out. It doesn't lose power over time. It just, keeps going 100% until it has no more juice. The battery pack is super light, about the same weight as the drag from a traditional like clip cord or RCA cord. So I love it. It's a game changer for me not having cords hanging around all over the place. And so, yeah, each one of these cartridges are magnetic. No plunger, it's hermetically sealed, so no ink is going to travel back into the machine. And it's really wide right here for you to grab onto. And also make sure that you don't touch the back part so you don't cross-contaminate, and don't want that going into your machine. So this is definitely a really nice system as far as like keeping things nice and safe for the client and you. And so yeah, that's my setup. I got obviously pre-wash water and final wash to make sure my cartridges are nice and clean before I start with the next color or whatever I'm doing at the time. And right here is tattoo butter from Ohana Organics. This beautiful shirt I'm wearing right now is the company that provides that. This is some numbing ointment right here from a company called TAC. I can use this to keep my client nice and happy and satisfied, and not be in a shit ton of pain while they're getting tattooed. I mean, I don't know about you, I care about my clients. I've been tattooing 18 years and I hate having a client move around and complain about the pain. So if I can make my job easier and make their day better, I'm gonna do it. So it's time to get with it. All right, so I just shaved the area where I'm gonna apply the tattoo. And now we're gonna cleanse it with alcohol very well and try and remove all the oils from the skin. This first paper towel is getting rid of the soap that I had used to shave with. Soap and stencils don't work well together, so we'll take that off. And now I'm going to really rub the shit out of the area to try and exfoliate. Not really, but just really get all that oil out of the skin. And a smart thing to do is get all around the area you're going to be tattooing. So I'm on this side of the leg. I'm going to get the back side too, just because it may somehow come in contact with that with your gloves touching all around. And so you want to clean all the bacteria potentially that's around the entire area. Your clients pay good money for a tattoo. They do not need an infection, so you owe it to them. Now I'm going to use the anchored tattoo stencil solution from Nico Hurtado. This is really, really good stuff. And I apply a nice amount on there. And I want to let that sit for a couple minutes and tack up. That way it's not all slimy. I want it to be nice and sticky when I go to put my stencil on there. So as that is drying up and tacking up a little bit, I'm going to go and get my stencil ready. Alright, so this is nice and sticky and ready to put the stencil on. A lot of times people will line up their stencil before they put the solution on there with a marker so that they will make sure that it's orientated the right direction. I don't feel like I need to do that with this image because it's not that critical. So I can eyeball it, and I have a lot of experience eyeballing my stencils and placing them where I'd like them to be. So that's how we're going to go about it today. I want this to be on the fattest portion and the flattest portion. As you can see, I put a couple of paper slits, like cuts in the image, so that I can get it to wrap nice and clean without getting wrinkled. And spread it from the inside out. So you can see how those little slits I cut come into play. Very important, because we all know skin is not flat entirely and it's round. If you're doing a portrait or something, I recommend you never do this to the face. You can do this more like to the hair and the bust of the body or something, but definitely not the face. And so as far as like the size of this image that we're going, the tattoo, I like to measure the width of a limb. That way I can make sure it covers just how wide it is. And that usually makes it fit a lot better. Most people want to go by how tall something is. Sometimes you have to, but I prefer to go with the width of the limb that I'm working with. That way I can make sure I maximize every bit of space that I can. And remove the stencil here, and we have a nice size tattoo about ready to happen here. So there it is. Let's get started in about 5 minutes after that's done drying, and we'll have a fun day today. Well, I have a 13 mag soft edge, or curved 13 as they call it, and I am going to show you just how much I hang it out. Let me get that set up real quick. So it's about 1/8 of an inch or more. I have that hanging out a good distance, mainly for so I can use the edges of my mag if need be, and also for good saturation. And yeah, it just makes it a lot easier. Skin's pretty tough. You can go deep. I don't recommend going crazy deep, but definitely it's a lot tougher than you think. So we're going to start off here on the bottom leaf underneath and start kind of like shaping out everything. When I tattoo, I don't use my backstroke too much. I always do a forward stroke. It's a lot more efficient that way. It helps me get a better healing on the tattoo, so I'm not really poking a bunch of unnecessary holes in the skin. The background behind this leaf is practically black, but don't really want to put a bunch of black everywhere, so I'll be fading this off into like some cool colors, like the cool grays that I selected that are on my tray. And you can see that you get very good saturation very quickly with the forward stroke. It looks like I'm using the backward stroke in conjunction with the forward stroke as I tattoo, but I really ain't. I pull the needle out of the skin before I do that. Just shaping out the sides of this leaf a little bit more on the right side here. This 13 mag is really awesome. I can get some subtle details and also cover a wide area. And if I need to scale up from there, it's not a problem. I have a 23 mag on the table there. Just waiting for whenever it needs to be used. As for now, I feel like this 13 mag is going to be just right for this leaf right here that I'm going to be working on for the next 20 minutes. Generally like to start off dark to light. I've been tattooing for 18 years and it's just kind of a habit by now. Some artists like to use or start off with like a base color and then manipulate it from there, which is also another nice way to go about it. And personally, I don't want to do that. If it's black, I'm going to put it down and then I can layer over it, whatever. Yeah, so we'll basically just layer in some dark greens over this black wherever need be. Right now I'm shaping out the veins on this leaf right here. It's going by pretty quick. The skin on the legs a lot tighter than other places on the body, so really awesome to work with. And you can see I'm using the corners of my mag right here, which is, like I said, a good reason why I hang the needles out so far, because the curved edge kind of is tucked in a lot more than, you know, the center of the needles, and to use those oftentimes it's a little bit too shallow. But unless we have a needle hanging out a good deal, then we can use the corners of that mag. Once I get a lot of this black laid in, we'll come in with some dark greens and layer right over it. I like a lot of high contrast in my artwork. I feel like it holds up a lot better on the skin over time, and it's a lot more readable from a distance. So I manipulated this image in Photoshop prior to tattooing it. That way I can have the background colors a little bit darker and the foreground colors a little bit lighter, and also have the colors look a lot more rich on my photo reference, and helps me just basically achieve a nicer tattoo that's more appealing to everyone. People love bright colors. So that's how we do it. to line out this rosebud, which I've kind of already started. Got the petal portion lined out in red right here. Like a dark red, kind of like crimson from Eternal. Mixed with a little bit of black. And any of the sharp edges, that's mainly what I'm lining out so that I can hold that nice sharp edge. Going to line out certain edges, especially the silhouette. That way I can make sure it kind of stands out pretty well. Unlike a lot of other realism artists, I really don't mind exposing some of my line work. I don't think it's that critical. It's just a part of my style and how I like to work. So I just like the way it translates better on skin. Not really like a bold black outline or anything, but mostly like color lines. You know, it gives me a lot more contrast. It reads well from farther, and it will kind of hold up a lot better over time. Yeah, mainly color lines, something of medium to dark in the value range. Values being, you know, how dark and how light things are. Going back to the basics of art. And once I get this outlined, I'll shade it in. Kind of old school, you know, like traditional line and shade, line and shade. Like I said, I started 18 years ago. That habit's been kind of drilled into me, and you know, I've learned to make it work for my style of tattooing. And you know, it's how it gets done now. This rosebud shouldn't take too long. It's definitely a lot less work than what's going on in the rest of the tattoo here. I have my 5-liner out, and since I have it out, any shading I can do with it, I'm just going to take care of it right now instead of having to come back to it later. And I do a lot of shading with my 5-liner. It's not just a liner, it's just a needle, another tool for the job. So you can do small details with the liner, and obviously make line work. So I say something like this area that I'm working on right here, I'm going to want to just go ahead and fill that in with the liner. Why not? I already have it in my hand. No sense in grabbing around for it. Boom. I'm also going to want to line out this section behind the bud here, which is the petal of the rose here. It's pretty much in the same vicinity of the rosebud. And as I work on the rosebud, I don't want to lose these stencil lines. Better play it safe than sorry. And so I'm actually going to line out a portion of this rose leaf that is around the rosebud. Just a small section, that way I can resume work going back to the rosebud. I'm going to mix around until I find the right colors. And I feel like I got it. Maybe go a little lighter. There we go. And get the under part of this petal here. So yeah, I have the liner out and I'm just going to line out certain sections around this petal here and make sure I can not lose it. You can see part of the stencil is wearing away right here, so I'm going to want to go ahead and line that out in the color that it appears to be. And I'll be able to resume working on this rosebud here now, because we have reached that point. Just a second. I don't know if you're like me, but it's hard to set down a needle, or you see other things you can do with it and just kind of go off on a tangent and start shading or lining out everything around you. Try your hardest not to do that, because if you have too many loose ends to tie up, you know what I mean, you just may forget one later on, and that will lessen the quality of your tattoo. So now I did the lining, I'm going to run through the range of needles. Now I'll go with the round, 7 round here. Set my distance here, and speed's rather high. Let's get to it. Do whatever work I can possibly do with this 7 round here. And then move on up to like a 9 round or 7 mag, depending on how good this looks when I'm done using the 7 round for this rosebud here. When I say 7 round, it's a 7 round shader, not a liner. think I'm ready to move up to a 9-round shader here. Feel like this is dragging me down, and I can work much faster and still get the same amount of quality if I moved up to a 9-round shader. I basically handled everything I can with this 7 round here. How's your tattoo feel? Not hurting you too bad? Alright. Not hurting her at all. Must not be doing my job right here. Hold on, let me pull out the coils. Change everything. Now, if you're doing some soft shading and blends and stuff, then I do like a full back and forth stroke where I am actually using the backward stroke. Sometimes though, if you want to be really precise in the way you're shading in, maybe just single strokes are really useful, where I can carefully spot a section that needs to be shaded and not alter the path a little bit, you know what I mean? Really nail that one little spot with a single stroke. And, you know, as my muscle memory develops, then I can go back and forth using the back and forth stroke. Funny thing about art is you kind of gradually build everything up until you're happy with it. So you may start shading something a certain color with a certain value or chroma, and you realize that wasn't quite what you needed, so you'll have to make adjustments. And so you can manipulate that over time and mold it into something that that you wanted or whatever. Definitely it's not set in stone until you walk away or if the skin is beat up. So be nice to the skin. It allows you to work it a little bit more than normal. About to move up to a 7 mag here shortly. I actually could have did a lot of this with the 7 mag, but I have the rounds out, so I might as well just use them. You do a lot with the 9-round shader. This is basically crimson with a little bit of black and mixed with it, get a dark red. I'm going to come back and layer some blacks over this dark red that I did. Once I get done with the mid-tones and dark tones, I'm going to come back in with the lighter tones and the highlights to finish it off. And then move on to one of the rose petals or the background. I guess wherever my eyes take me. Generally try to work from the bottom up, but I don't always follow that protocol. Get some of these lighter medium reds in there. Don't really use too much moisture on my towel. I try to keep it semi-moist. If it's too wet, it's going to remove the stencil a lot quicker. And I try to make sure I spread out the moisture inside the paper towel evenly. That way I can prevent having a bunch of smears everywhere. This is just moist enough to wipe the ink away and still retain my stencil. I pulled out my liner. I'm going to put some highlights. Put some highlights in this bud here, some pinks. There we go. Go right over that red that I just put in. Boom. That takes care of that portion of the red. Double check, see if I missed anything. Possibly. Right here. Clean out my needle. I'm going to actually use some whites right now. Let's finish up this rosebud. I don't want to have to come back to it later. So I'll just go ahead and put the white highlights in there. A lot of people are afraid to put white in, you know, until like the end of the tattoo. You know, some skin types don't allow you to really do that because they will get all stained and stuff. I'm very familiar with my client's skin, and I know that I can get away with it and not have to worry so much. So that's why I'm putting in all the lighter tones as I please. So I get to get away with a lot more here. Grab my 7 mag and finish off most of the bigger shading in this rosebud here. And you'll see this thing really start to take shape in a minute here. In this case, I'm putting the light tones and medium tones in, and I'm going to shade over that with some darker tones and lighter tones. So I'm kind of starting a little bit of a base color, and then I manipulate from that point forward. Taking my 7 mag and filling in the spots that need to be done. If you're able to see the reference, and you understand a lot of what's going on right now. You know, just watching it take shape is a lot of fun. I generally try to save my highlights to the end, but sometimes it's necessary to put them in a lot sooner. It's okay to layer over all the other colors. You can actually change them in the skin and manipulate them. Definitely do a lot of that as I'm tattooing. This rosebud is almost done. Nice to move on here after this. Nothing like progress. Pull out my liner, run through this one more time with some highlights in the green portions. I have a 5 liner. Generally don't go any lower than that. Sometimes I'll use a 3. It all depends on the size of the tattoo. I'm going to go right over some of these medium greens that I've already established and manipulate them in the skin. See how it just kind of pops out now. Big difference. Yep, so that worked out really well. Definitely can do a little bit lighter in some of those highlights. That was like a really light yellowy green. I'm going to go to something that has more of a white base and then layer over that, and it's actually going to change that to a really light green. And basically going to use like some white with a super pale green here. That's going to really do the trick. Boom. So look at how much different that is. It's much nicer. Alright, let's move on. I'm going to do, I guess, some more background behind this rosebud so I can move on to the petal here. So what I like to do throughout my session is to make sure I add a couple drops of water on all the ink caps. Over time, they tend to dry up and crust over on the top, making the ink a little kind of unworkable. And if you have it, where it's just too chunky, it has a problem going in the skin. So you want to improve the consistency or the viscosity of the ink, make it a lot more fluid so it can go inside the skin. We poke tiny little holes in the skin, and that ink has to travel into the skin. So you don't want to push mud into the skin. So therefore, make sure you maintain your viscosity of your ink so that it's, able to go into those tiny little holes we poke. I have a couple of drops on each cap, and before I use every color, I like to stir it around a little bit, make sure it's not just all water being used. Don't worry about it diluting the ink too much to where it's looking too light. That's not going to happen. Today's ink is really strong, so it's nothing to really worry about. So we just took a break, and I finished up this section right here right before we went on break. And you can see I finished up the rosebud and the leaves behind it. Now we're able to start getting into the actual rose itself. I'm going to start off on this back petal right here. Basically going to line everything out. I'm going to line out the silhouette of the petal, and then I'm going to line out all the textures like the vein work and the folds of the petal. Any color blends and transitions, I'm definitely going to use a mag for that. But yeah, pretty old school. I definitely like to line things out before I shade. It's a lot easier that way for me. So for the same value pink, basically how dark and how light, that's value. So whatever value of pink that I use, I'm gonna mix it with the same value of gray. So say I'm gonna go with this value right here of pink, which is magenta. I'm gonna stir this around because I just poured some water on it. And I'm going to mix it into one of my grays of the same value. So that would probably be either this one or that one. I'm going to go darker. Okay. Stir that around. And then I'm going to go back into my pink. And I'll check my color. Make sure it's where I need to be. That seems about right. If it's a little too dark, then I'll do the same process and go into a lighter gray. So let's start lining this thing out here, huh? I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the textures involved with roses and so forth. So I don't really pay 100% attention to my reference. I have my stencil there to kind of guide me and tell me where I need to go. But it's not like a portrait of someone's face where it's super critical. These veins can go many different directions. They all kind of uniformly flow in the same direction, but you can reroute them however need be. It's not overly critical. Sometimes I use a mag to do my vein work, but these ones so closely resemble lines. Like why would I use a mag for that? Because I'm more like a softer, like edge of a line, and yeah, I can turn my mag on its side and do it that way. But these appear to have more of a sharper kind of edge. Be careful not to go too dark. It's okay to go light at first, but if you go too dark, then you're stuck practically with that dark vein. That will look kind of weird. So, you can always build up shades. It's kind of hard to lighten things up. It can be done, but I don't recommend going that route. Coming into these darker magenta kind of veins here. Not so much gray anymore. And starting off light, seeing if it's where I need to be. If it needs to be darkened, then I can do that. If it's too light, I'd rather have that. And as I finish these veins and stuff, I'm gonna shade like right over these things and in between them. So I try and do a real quick single pass through these things to where I'm not, working the skin too much. I want to have a little bit of room to play. So if I go and just kind of nail that line too dark and too saturated, it's gonna possibly the skin's gonna get a little bit too beat up in that section when I go to shade over it at a later point. I don't always stencil out everything on here. Some things are easily identifiable. So not necessary, to work an entire stencil and cover every little thing. You yourself have to do a little bit of problem solving during the middle of art, tattoo, whatever you want to call it. So it's kind of like map reading. You guys gotta learn to find your way, find out where you're at, and move on from there. Generally, I try to locate like known points on the stencil or reference, and I can build from there. That makes things a lot easier for me. I can find my place. If the stencil's a little bit too gnarly, it's just find a key point where for 100% what that is on your reference, and then you can build from there. And once you unlock that mystery, all the other ones will kind of follow suit. Going in for some darker vein work here. I just had a cup of coffee, and doing these lines, they just kind of naturally come out shaky, so like the texture's actually improved a bit. Just fucking around. I don't really recommend that, but it helps me to stay alert and get through the tattoo. If coffee makes you shake, probably shouldn't do that, but for me, I've been drinking it for so damn long, it's not a problem. Kind of sculpting these veins out from light to dark. That way, like I said, I don't want to go too dark at first. contour right here of the other petals. That way I can separate this petal from all the other ones and then begin shading it. Like I said, I'm going to hit the contour of the entire petal with the liner. That way I can resume shading. You may ask yourself, what colors do I want to line things out? Well, you have a choice of lining things out with the color of the foreground of whatever object you're working on, or the background. That's a choice that, call that you gotta make depending on what you're doing at the time. I tend to line it out with the background color if I can. If I can't really line out the background color because I'm not sure of what I want to do in the background at the time, then I'll line it out with the foreground color. So like if this is a pink petal, I'll line it out with pink if I don't know what I'm doing in the background. But here I do know what I'm doing in the background. I'm going with the cool grays. So I'm going to line it out in cool grays. The great thing about lining stuff out in the gray is you can manipulate that color down the line and change it, just by tattooing over it. These aren't perfect lines, what I'm doing. I'm not focused on saturation. I'm just trying to identify it and make a mark, and helps to hold an edge because I am going to shade up to these. So it's not overly critical that I do like a perfect saturated line on these things. The main thing is to just not let them be like weird and shaky or wonky looking, you know what I mean? Just definitely try a little bit, Since I'm working some of this background here, I'm gonna just go ahead and take care of this edge right here because I have a liner in my hand. So, this is one of those times where I'm actually going off on a tangent. But let's put this liner down and actually start getting into what we're supposed to be working on, which is this petal right here. So I did the vein work, damn near. I think I'm missing a few minor veins here. These guys right here, yep, right here. All the way to the edge. And I can come back in and build on some of these veins here where they have different thicknesses or line weight, whatever you want to call it. And I can always do that at a different time. I just want to start off with my 5 liner, kind of get them established and build up the intensity of the color or the values of the color, and also build up the line weight as I go about it. But not everything's set in stone. I'm not just going to stop with the liner in these portions here. I'll be doing quite a bit of work with each needle in my arsenal. So that's most of the work for the 5 liner. Let's jump into my 7 round. and start adding some line weight to some of these veins I just did. Set the depth of my round here. You'll notice that I pass over things quite a bit, and it may appear that I like overwork things, but keep in mind skin's pretty strong, and my machine is not running all that high to a point where, like, you know, I'm just maxing out the skin every time I touch it. You know, I leave a lot of room for saturation. Almost done with this 7 round, building up the line weight on these veins here. I'm gonna pull out the 7 mag and start actually shading in some of the parts of the pedal where I have some blends going on. Something that a round and a liner would have a lot of problems doing. Looks like this pedal's edge got flipped up right about here. I'm just doing some weird shit, and yeah, I think it looks kind of cool. So you know, I kept that in my reference as opposed to just taking it out and redrawing the pedal's edge right there the way it would probably look if it were perfect. But sometimes irregularities and blemishes are really nice looking. Gives it a little bit more characteristic, I guess you can say. So let's start doing some 7 mag work here. I'm going to work some of these depressions in the pedal here. Start getting some of these more smoother, subtle textures and blends established here. I have an awesome client today. It's my wife, Angela. She started off as my client and still is. Tattooed her about 17 years ago on her toe. And like that rock in your shoe you just can't get out, she's still here. Love you, honey. Anyways, she has a lot of my older work on her, as well as some of my new work. Today she gets a nice new piece from me. It's been a while. I haven't tattooed her in about 2 or 3 years. Kind of spotting in this 7 mag with some subtle details, and then I'll pick up my 13 mag and kind of start finishing off certain areas. I really like this magenta color from Eternal Ink. It's kind of watery. A lot of people have problems with it. They don't really enjoy working with it because they say they have problems saturating it. And I can understand how they feel about it, but I don't. I don't take it at face value, the color. I definitely know what happens, when I tattoo with it. I'm familiar with the color, so, whatever color it turns out to be when I tattoo with it, that's what I plan it to be before I start a tattoo. So I know it's going to come out kind of watery and vibrant. That's exactly what I wanted. If I didn't want that, then I wouldn't settle for it. But it's a good transition from like purple to light magenta. There's like no white base in there, so definitely it's not as strong as like light magenta and stuff, or your pinks and stuff. Use the color for how it appears in the skin and not for how it looks in the bottle, okay? That's a good rule of thumb. That way you don't set yourself up for disappointment. Cut in some of this background here, since I have the 7 mag out. I'm about to move up in needle size to a 13 mag. And so I might as well just use this needle real quick to kind of shade up to the outer edge of this petal. Much cleaner than using a bigger needle. And, whatever I miss with the 7 mag, I'm going to come back in with a round or something later and clean that up as well. Try to be efficient as I work, so that's why you'll see me go off on a tangent and work an area I really wasn't working on at the time. I try to get full use out of whatever needle is in my hand at the time, so if I'm a 1/4 inch to 1 inch away from something that I can just easily take care of with that particular needle at the time, I'm just going to do it. Or if I have the color out and I'm working with something, with anything around it with that color, I'm probably going to blast it too. Why not? Try not to get too carried away, because there's a lot of work to be done in realism, and the more you go off on a tangent, the more likely you are to, to forget something down the line. Cross your I's and dot your T's, right? Or whatever they say. So I'm gonna continue working on the larger textures and blends and color transitions with this 13 mag. And When you see this tattoo again, hopefully this petal is finished and I can start working in the center of the rose here. Really cool colors that I made, like some really pinkish grays looking here. We are beginning to line out the rest of this flower here so I can just start working away at it. I'm just going to go ahead and line out the entire thing and then start cracking away. So, color line all the edges to the best of my ability. And, make sure I don't erase too much stencil that I need. Any vein work, line it out. And definitely try to be precise. Now, maybe scared or hesitant to line out certain things, but just got to use good judgment and understand what color you're working with. And like I said, you line out the foreground or the background of any section. And I choose normally to line out the background color. Just makes it easier for me. I'd rather go a little bit too light than too dark. I can always change it to a darker line or edge, but I can't really lighten it up. The reason why I like to line this first is it just allows me to work a lot more freely and have less anxiety as I work. If I have to worry about a stencil being erased the entire time, it's going to slow me down and make me a lot more hesitant to do certain things. Just produces a lot more anxiety for me. I don't know how you feel, but for me, I get a lot more anxiety having to shade off of a stencil. And if I have a lot of anxiety and I'm worried about too much, I'm less likely to pull the trigger and do the right thing at whatever moment I'm doing. Like just undue stress, I don't need it. It's something I don't want to deal with. So I'd rather just line things out. I have a lot of experience with this, so a lot of my lines, they get concealed. You don't really see the line work that I do in the finished product, but it definitely is there. You get better at this technique if you do it enough. And for me, it just helps speed up everything and give me more accurate results. As I said before, I don't really mind exposing some of my line work. If I can do it without exposing line work, yeah, I guess that would be ideal, but sometimes it happens. I try to produce a quality tattoo and be really efficient about it, and lining out the tattoo first helps me get through the process a lot quicker and a lot cleaner. And getting to do the center of this rose is going to be a lot of fun. I think it's really beautiful and it really grabs my attention. When I'm lining out this rose here, I'm trying to leave room for the white highlighted edges on the tips of the petals. And so oftentimes I don't connect the lines so that I can have room to put the highlights. So say in this area right here, I'm going to leave room for a highlight. So see, go right close to that line parallel. There's a little subtle room right there for a highlight of an edge. Client's sitting very well. Definitely for line work, it's important that they sit still, not talk with their hands, talk with their body, not have a friend close by talking to them and distracting them. It's a small thing that can really annoy a tattoo artist while you're working, and try and keep those distractions away. The tattoo process involves both parties, not just the artist. can't expect us to sit here and do a good job if they're moving around. We wouldn't necessarily do that for a haircut. So if you're an artist and you're watching this video and you plan on getting tattooed by somebody else, keep that in mind next time you're in the chair. And you know, educate your clients. Let them know how important it is to sit down and don't fucking move, or else they get a bad tattoo. And you know, as an artist, we're the first one they point the blame at, so, and rightfully so, because we didn't make it abundantly clear then how important it is not to move during the tattoo process. And as a tattoo artist, you need to take command of the situation and make sure that your client is paying attention and following protocol to sit in your chair. That's why I have my wife here for the video. Of course, if I get mad at her, she beats me with a stick. I can't really tell her how it is, I just gotta put up with her, but she's awesome. She'll feed me dog shit for dinner, and I don't really want to eat that. Nobody does. So for those who say realism artists don't do line work, there is solid proof. We do, at least I do. Yep, we do lines for sure. And I ain't talking about just the white ones. At least I know some artists who are doing a lot of lines. I'm talking about the wrong kind.
Just slid that in there. Now it's gone.
Yeah, they know who they are. They're fucking up. It's a matter of time before it catches up with them. But let's get back on the subject here and talk about tattooing and not drug addiction. It isn't necessary to line out the entire tattoo, or line out anything that has a hard edge. You can always use rounds and mags to kind of cut that in. But I just like really defining the edges a lot more. I feel like it makes it sharper and more readable from a distance. Poetry